Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe. My name's Kyle Smith. I'm a former athlete now working with Athletics Canada as the coaching coordinator. To give you an overview of today's setup, I think a lot of you have been here already, so you kind of have an idea of what's going on. But I'm going to introduce the panelists. Each coach will then present a case study and discuss their applications. And then once each coach has presented, we will begin the question portions of the audience and then the moderator. So just a couple things before we begin. You are all muted. If you have any questions, please address them in the questions dialog box in your screen. John LaFranco there, who is the coaching manager of Athletics Canada, he's there answering the questions. We'll leave about 15 minutes to questions at the end, and we're going to do our best to get to everyone. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so please keep it on the topic today. The webinar is recorded, and you'll be able to see it in the coming days as we'll post it on the AC website. And lastly, coaches who have entered their NCCP number will receive 1 PD point for today's participation. All right, so let's go with, we'll start introducing. The first person we have today, Coach Charles Allen, is a high performance sprint coach at Athletics Canada East Hub in Toronto. Coach Allen achieved a master's degree at Clemson University while he coached himself to the 2004 Olympic finals in 110-meter hurdles. Charles now coaches Canada's top female sprinter, who is a NACAC and Pan Am medalist and Canadian record holder in the 200-meter, Olympian Crystal Emanuel. Nick Stoffberg is the current hurdles coach at the University of Alberta. He is a two-time junior national team event coach and has been an event coach for Team BC and Team Alberta at various championships, from Legion Nationals to Canada Summer Games. Nick is an NCCP performance coach in sprints and hurdles. So to many, he was known as the Einstein of track and field. Kurt Downs is the head coach of Border City Athletic Club. He has served as the national team coach of a diverse group of athletes across the sprints, hurdles, middle distance, and jumps groups, as well as across the youth, junior, senior, international level athletes, including Canada's 800-meter record holder, Olympian Brandon McBride. And if that doesn't impress you enough, he was named AC's 2019 Coach of the Year. So we got some fantastic presenters today. I'm very looking forward to this. So Charles, you've already got your screen set up. I believe everyone can see it already. I'm just gonna let you go.
All right. Thank you for that warm introduction, Kyle. I'm just going to talk briefly about achieving success in the sprints and kind of what we did with Crystal and why she's been so successful. Of course, she's been really consistent over the years. She's won 10 national titles in the 100 meters and 200 meters. She's also lowered the Canadian 200-meter record. She's also competed internationally just about at every major championship, which is pretty impressive. Her best showing came in the 2017 World Championships, where she finished 7th in the 200 meters. Success is achieved through consistent performances at a very high level. Therefore, it's important that we surround Crystal with an excellent integrated support team and staff at the East Hub. These professionals assist Crystal in the medical field, in the mental performance area, strength and conditioning, nutrition, biomechanics, and wellness overall. Continuing with consistent performances, if you take a look at this chart here, I started working with Crystal in 2016. She ran a personal best in 100 meters and in the 200 meters that year. She continued to progress in 2017, 2018, 2019, continuing to run faster and stayed very consistent through those years. Well, there's a reason for that. Part of our training, we really stay focused on our sprint drills from year to year. I'll tell you why this is key in a sec. The drills that we keep in mind each time is our ankling, which is sometimes called dribble, or I believe it's called dribble today, ham kicks, A skip, B skip, and A run. These drills are executed on a weekly basis, and we keep that in the program year round. It's very important that these drills are executed very well. If Crystal or the other athletes are doing the drills incorrectly, I stop them and I tell them to start over. This is how key I believe the drills are in what we do. It impacts the stride efficiency, making sure that contact is under the hip and power is distributed through the sprint. It also optimizes the sprint mechanics. We want to be in front side position when sprinting, not backside position. So these drills are key in our program and in keeping Crystal consistent. And you've seen that in a chart I posted here from year to year, where you can see your best times throughout those years. I'll now like to just share some of the drills with you so you can see them and just give you a few pointers of what I look at when I see the drills being executed. Here, the ankling dribble. Again, very dorsiflexed, pulling the ground back. If I can get this to play just one more time here. Okay, pulling the ground under our feet, contact onto the hip. Very active knee. Next drill, ham kick. Okay, computer's thinking here a little bit. Give me a sec. Okay, just gonna switch back here. I think the screen's a bit frozen on me here. Okay. Ham kick, snapping the heel to the hamstring. Okay, again, very active with that knee and foot and landing under the hip. Very important in terms of really affecting the stride efficiency. Okay, hoping I can play that one more time here for you. No, I can't. So I'll just move forward to the next drill. Okay, A skip, tucking that heel to the hamstring again. Good high knee and driving the heel down again under the hip. I'll play that for you one more time. Okay, dorsiflex with the ankle, tight heel to hamstring, and driving down under the hip. Okay, B skip, same deal, tight heel to the hamstring, good extension, aggressive pullback into the ground and under the hip. I emphasize these points over and over to make sure that, again, she always returning to where she started, under the hip, aggressive pullback. Okay, I'll play that one more time. Okay, and the last row, our A run. Okay, very active, good high knee, tucking the heel, again, under the hamstring, and really good force coming into the ground. Okay, these drills are in our program every year, and it really helps with Crystal being very efficient with her sprint mechanics. So what I would like to do now is just show you a couple videos starting in 2016, what she looked like when she executed, stuck here again. Okay, when she would execute a run here. So a bit of a backside position there, not able to get the knees nice and active coming through, putting a bit of stress on the hamstring. So this is in 2016. First year I started working with her and really trying to get her to do as much drills as possible. So the volume were up in these drills, but the quality of it wasn't wasn't where I would like it. So let's take a look at 2017. Okay, quite a bit of a change there. Very active, very deliberate, coming down with a lot of force into the ground. All right, so the drills, doing them started to pay it off, doing them, quite often in our program. 2018. Down the way. All right, continue to be very active, punching that knee through, keeping the heel tight. Down the way. She transitioned into top end position there. Okay, and that was in 2018. 2019, again, same deal. You can see once she's had, the drills years after year, she tends to lock in. She knows how to sprint extremely well, and there's a reason why, she's achieved the success that she has in our sport, being very consistent. In summary, success is achieved through consistent performances at a very high level. Providing very good, the very best coaching and support is necessary for our athletes to be successful. And aiming for efficiency and consistency when preparing these athletes to perform is key. And it will just progressively build year after year. So that's just a short snippet of what's made Crystal successful in the sprints. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. That was cool. I won't ask any questions. We're just gonna let it go to our next person. So Nick, I'll give you, boom. You should have the screen now. Up. Perfect.
Can everyone see okay? Okay. All right, thanks Kyle for the introduction, and thanks Charles for that presentation. My name is Nick Stoffberg. I'm currently the hurdle coach at the University of Alberta. Today I'm going to be, even though we're talking about assessing success in the sprints overall, we're looking at the sprint hurdles from my perspective. So what are some of the considerations that we take from the event, and how do we apply them to various levels of development? Okay, so let's start with some questions. So what are the important elements, or some of the important elements to good hurdling? How are some of the ways that we train them, and how are you going to apply that to your context? So why is it relevant to you? Okay, so those are some of the things we're going to try to answer today. So starting with pillars of hurdle training, we're going to look at acceleration and maximal velocity. We're going to look at takeoff and posture, inter-hurdle rhythm, as well as developing confidence. And that's not to suggest that these are the only things that are important to good hurdling. They're just the four that we're going to focus on today, and they're four key ones in my perspective. Okay, so let's start with talking about the hurdler as a sprinter. So like any short event, like any event, you're expected to accelerate and attain a top speed. So if we look at the pictures that are slightly to the right, we start on the far side with Shelley and Fraser-Price. Sprinter, high thigh position, ready for the contact. Moving left, we look at the elite hurdler, same idea. High thigh position, getting ready for contact. And even at the varsity level, we see the same thing, high thigh position, foot preparing, vertical contact. Okay, so we're trying to achieve the same positions. So the more we can think of the hurdler as a sprinter that's adapting the skill to their specific environment, I think the better off we are. We'll touch a little bit more on how far an elite hurdler accelerates into the race, but let's just talk about speed for a second. The female hurdlers are approaching 9 meters per second. Male hurdlers about 9.4, give or take. That's fast. And if you consider that it has to be applied to a space where strides are restricted. That's even more impressive. Okay, so a female, if we're taking on average, assuming clearance is about 3, they probably have about 183 per step. A male hurdler probably has just over 2 meters, somewhere in the 205 range. When you compare that to the 100-meter sprint, where they're well over 2 meters, you definitely have to emphasize the frequency element and be able to change that. Takeoff and posture, we're trying to be aggressive, tackling the ground with our contacts to push ourselves into a good position. If you look at the elite hurdlers and you look at the university hurdlers here in these 2 pictures, we're going to see a forward posture. And we're going to also see people who are trying to create distance from the hurdle. So we're trying to create separation. So one of the things you see with someone who's taking a step forward or a developmental hurdler is proximity, right? So we end up seeing a high trajectory, and that's caused by being too close, okay? So we're trying to develop the ability to stay far away, okay? So being aggressive, having a nice forward posture, and creating separation between you and the hurdle. Inter-hurdle rhythm. So we talked already about the hurdler as a sprinter and being able to sprint between the hurdles. We also talked about the demand of smaller spacing. We need to be able to manipulate stride frequency. And one of the ways that we achieve this is by playing with height and spacing. So on the right, we have a senior athlete who's achieved some good success in the hurdles, and they still often use a drill such as this. So if you look at the hurdles, if you can see the marks on the track, we're probably in the 750 range, so they're reduced in terms of the spacing, and they're probably only 24 inches. Additionally, this runner's in flats. So we're manipulating the height and the space of the environment to force frequency, okay? We want to be able to take that rhythm as far as we can. And so for you, I think where that could be a positive thing is with a developmental hurdler, sometimes getting to the hurdle is an issue. So playing with height and spacing can allow that to happen more naturally. So we're not only developing the rhythm that's going to help us in the future, but we're also dealing with what's going to help us now. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, in terms of confidence. We already talked a little bit about the smaller or bigger spacing and the different things that can achieve, or at least the reduced spacing. We also want to talk about lower and higher hurdle heights and the hurdling with both legs. So one strategy that we've used, at least with our male hurdlers, I find that coming in, transitioning from the junior to senior height, so 39 inches to 42 inches can be a difficult thing. So we've played around with the idea of using 45s in a pop-over environment. So I'm not dealing with really how fast I'm moving in between. I'm just dealing with the mechanics over a higher height. Stole that one from a colleague on BC who loves to use that. But I also know that Charles himself played around with that idea when he was training himself. And then also when he was being introduced to the 42s. So hopefully he can speak a little more to that in the question period. So essentially what you need to take from this is adapt the space to your need, because there's going to be times where you need to reduce space significantly to allow the athlete to feel that rhythm. There's going to be times where you need to use a bigger spacing that's closer to race distance to allow them to feel what it's going to be like, okay? And then typically hurdling with both legs is reserved for intermediate hurdlers, but I think that developing that confidence at a young age can be a positive thing for even a short hurdler, okay? So if we look at it from a coordination perspective, learning to take a hurdle on both sides, maybe it's at different velocities, that's okay. It's going to help us with confidence, which is going to be key in staying in the event and moving through. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about a little bit more about elite versus developing athletes. We touched on acceleration earlier. The reality is the best hurdlers are accelerating through 5 hurdles. And that's far. For a male athlete, that's just over 50 meters. That's running the 110s. For a female athlete, that's around 47 meters. Despite this, they're able to be consistent with their takeoff posture, being aggressive, and then also their takeoff distance. So they're relatively hitting the same point in terms of takeoff and touchdown, within reason. This means that as we get faster and move through the run, we're handling an increased coordinative load. So that athlete's going to deal with that a few ways, mainly by increasing frequency. But that is not a natural feeling for everyone. So I think that's something that we have to work on and develop. If we look at developing athletes, we can assume the opposite. They don't accelerate as far. They're less consistent with their takeoff posture and distance. And they're only able to handle a certain level of coordinative demand. So it's going to be important to develop those things in them. So ultimately, what does that all mean for training? Okay, so if we look at the 4 points, we're going to come back to is dedicate time to sprinting. An athlete needs to sprint regularly. We need to learn how to accelerate. We need to learn the positions that are relevant to upright sprinting. We need to hurdle regularly. And I say hurdle regularly because if we look at it from a ratio perspective, if an athlete only has 3 days to train, well, we should probably be spending 2 of those days sprinting. And we probably need to spend 1 of those days hurdling. That may shift as you get older. An older athlete who's probably closer to their peak velocity or their best ability, best speed, is probably dealing with the task a little bit more. So they're probably hurdling 2 to 1. And there's going to be times where you need to do something that's in between. I know a colleague that had some very good success this year. The biggest thing they took away is they needed to sprint as often as they hurdled. So the ratio, it's always really relevant to your context. But if we're generalizing, sprint more when you're younger, introduce hurdles, and hurdle more when you're older. Okay? Develop that confidence through the things that we talked about, playing with rhythm and spacing and height, hurdling with both legs, and develop general coordinative abilities. And I won't get into that because if we talk about the specifics, we're talking about the specifics of hurdling. We're playing around with that through our adjustment of spacing and height. So the general things are going to refer to stuff such as the dribbling that Charles talked about. So sprinting with a truncated motion or a reduced range, multi-jumps, limb isolation drills. Kurt will talk a little bit more about that. So anytime you're doing a stick run or a band run where you're eliminating arms to introduce more emphasis on the legs, those are some of the ways that we can do that. So that's just hopefully a bit of a taste of some of the things that we do, and I'm going to leave the rest to Kurt to talk about in the next presentation. So thank you. My contact is available. If you do want to get a hold of me, please reach out. I'm happy to talk hurdling. I really enjoy it. And yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. That was amazing. You're doing it for me, even better. There we go. Kurt, you should have the floor now.
All right. Leave. Is that right? Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Thanks a lot, Charles. Thanks, Nick. Sorry here. Just trying to set that up. Oh. All right. So for me, I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to look at success in the sprints, but I'm going to look at them from a little bit of a different perspective. I'm going to look at the long sprints, and I do include the 800 meters as a long sprint, but I come from a little bit of a different lens or view than Nick and Charles. My daily environment is a little bit more diverse in athlete population. I'm coaching athletes from the age of 7 all the way up to 27. And as such, I'm also coaching athletes that are across multiple disciplines and athletes that are their level is developmental, youth, junior, senior, collegiate, post-collegiate, and as well as some international level athletes as well. So what I do see is I see a diverse range of body types. I always thought this image here was an interesting image. And I can't remember if it's a Sports Illustrated or if it's from an Olympics preview or something along those lines. Not exactly sure. But the important thing is that it poses a question. And the question that it poses to me is how do you characterize your athletes? And I want you to think about that for a second. Another image here. Similarly with female athletes this time. And if you look across the different different images of the female athletes, you're going to realize there's varying body types. And in fact, some of them are track and field athletes. And since track is a sport that is built on the foundation of diversity, as humans, what we do is we look at ways to group them so that we can coach them to their abilities or their needs. And one of the ways that coaches, like myself, that is coaching a wide array of athletes, one of the things that we do is we try to group them by event-specific needs or event-specific demands. So in essence, what we're doing is we're creating profiles for those athletes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about profiling athletes in this range or in this grouping, the 400 hurdles, and the 800 meters. The first category that I'm going to look at is speed. So in speed, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick overview of these four categories, and then what I'll do is I'll give you a little bit of a description of them, or how at least I see them. Speed is the first one. The second one would be speed over duration. Next one would be capacity, and the final profiling area or category would be coordinative types of activities. So if we're looking at speed or speed development, what we're looking at with speed would be acceleration, overcoming inertia. And in that overcoming inertia, what we're doing is we're looking at the ability to push from varied start positions, a 3-point start, a 2-point start, a rollover, a 4-point start from blocks. And one of the key phrases we think about is rhythm and rise, being able to apply force down and back behind us. The second category, if we're looking at speed development, we normally think of max velocity or top end speed. And in that, we think about fly runs, sprint, float, sprint, fast, easy, fast types of runs, running A's to acceleration. We may think about something along the lines of what Nick was talking about, that inter-hurdle rhythm, and making that incredibly fast up to that 50 meters or that 47 meters and beyond. And then lastly, we think about running up tall, sprinting and contacting the ground underneath the hips, as Charles mentioned in his presentation as well. The second category that you look at placing athletes in would be speed over duration. And when I think of speed over duration, I think about speed endurance or special endurance. And I'm thinking about longer efforts of sprinting. I'm thinking about racing at or doing runs of race pace. I'm thinking about high race intensities or race intensities that are as close to race pace as possible. And then I start thinking about faster rhythms that are race specific. Third category we look at placing athletes in, or that I look at placing athletes in, is that capacity category. Now, capacity, it can also be thought about as aerobic. It can be thought about as continuous or steady state types of runs. It can include longer warm-ups or long runs, longer tempo runs, timed runs. fartleks, where you're doing things at a specific duration mixed in with runs, jogs, walks, or drills, in addition to runs on the treadmill or bike. Anything that would build a capacity or build the engine of the athlete. And the last category we look at is the coordinative category. And these are things that promote skills, postures, proper postures, being able to organize your body in space. And these are some of the drills that Charles referred to earlier as well. The dribbling, the ankling, derivatives, A runs, exchange derivatives, rhythm and frequency runs, banded exercises, multi-jumps, and dynamic lifts in the weight room. So what I've done is I've put together 2 profiles of 2 athletes that I've coached. And if you look at these 2 athletes here, one would be Crystal Ann Bayshard, and the second one, a 400-meter runner. That is a youth 400-meter runner. Actually, sorry, junior now. And Brandon McBride, a 200-meter runner, a sprinter and jumper in his former life. Now, although they have similar body types, you can tell they're long legs, long lean frames. I chose to group them together in this speed over duration as a profile for both the athletes because they enjoy that type of work. And when I say enjoy that type of work, I mean they enjoy doing workouts in this range, where they have a specific race pace, they have a specific race intensity that they want to hit, and they like to feel that race pace and that race intensity more often than not. Now, I do have to mention, when I say you build a profile for an athlete and you place them into a category, that doesn't mean that you're going to negate all of the other types of work. That doesn't mean to say that Crystal Ann or that Brandon don't do acceleration work, or they don't do speed work, or they're never doing anything capacity based or coordinative based. No, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that they do enjoy this work, and sometimes you do have to play to their strengths. So for Crystal Ann, one of the things that she really enjoys to do is a workout. It's 7 times 100 with a 50-meter jog. And what we try to do is we try to hit 13.5 seconds per each 100-meter segment that she runs. And for her, that would add up to 54 seconds. And if you see her PB is 53.8, so what we're trying to do is race just at, or sorry, do the workout and complete each of the segments just at that race pace, or as close to it as possible. For Brandon, because he's doing an event that's twice the distance of Crystal Ann, we would do something in the 200-meter segment for him. We would do something along the lines of 2 times 3 to 4 times 200 meters. And what we would do is look at doing each of those segments in 24 to 26 seconds. And that 26 seconds would add up to a 1:44 800-meter time for him. So one of the things I think that's important here is playing to their strengths. And as Nick had mentioned, these types of workouts help to give these athletes the confidence in their ability to hit those race paces or faster than race paces in each segment of their race. So I think that that's something important for when you're profiling athletes. Give them something that they can feel confident about, that they enjoy doing. Next group of athletes that I profiled here, is Gage Marshall and Kelsey Bockwell, another 2 athletes that I work with. Now, sometimes you have to look at giving athletes things that they really enjoy to do, and sometimes you have to look at giving athletes a type of work or placing them into a category where they can be successful. For Gage and for Kelsey, they are the powerful type of athlete. They like to lift, they like to express themselves using explosive movements, lots of med ball, they love to throw shot puts, they like to do lots of sleds and resisted work. what I've found is with this type of body type or this type of athlete, they have a tendency to become, really uncoordinated at times throughout the year. So as a result, what I do is I place these two athletes into the coordinative type of profile. And that just means that they need to have a steady diet of coordinative types of activities. And that's to keep them healthy. So for Gage, that would mean lots of ankling, dribbling. It would mean rhythm runs. Although he's a 200 and 400 meter runner, we do put low hurdles up at about 18 footsteps apart. He does a very quick jog into it with 3-step rhythm between them, and he steps down over top of the hurdle. Little banana hurdles that is. And I think it's great for coordination for him. We call them rhythm runs. And although he's a big guy, at age 15, he was lifting 315 pounds bench press, 360 pound squat. At that point in time, he was playing football. What I have him do is I have him do a lot of dynamic lifts in the weight room, a lot of step ups, lunge jumps, things like that. I think it's great for his coordination. With Kelsey, it's very similar. With her, we do a lot of alternate banded exchanges for her limbs. We do a ton of multi-jumps. We do rhythm runs, like I mentioned, with the mini hurdles. And we also keep it very dynamic in the weight room as well. We like to do combinations, dynamic combination lifts for her. And what it does for these athletes, it gives them the confidence to be able to express their power in a controlled environment, which I think is important. And I think it also helps to keep them healthy. Now, takeaways from this. Commonalities and likes. I think you always have to keep things that athletes do and that they like in a place where they can continue to do them. So I refer back to Crystal Ann and to Brandon. They never race well, and it could be something that physically they need or something that mentally they need if they can't feel that race rhythm often. So I try to give them a steady diet of those types of things. Differences in needs. I look at athletes, for instance, like a Gage or a Kelsey. Yes, they are speed power based types of athletes. Yes, they love to lift, but the difference is that they absolutely need to be able to do some coordinative types of work to stay maximally coordinated as long as they possibly can. So I think it's important for you to consider all the factors. Don't just have the athletes doing acceleration all the time. You have to pepper in some of the things like the coordinative types of exercises as well, even though they would fit into that coordinative profile. Last takeaway I have is I think that you need to determine some tests for your athletes. And once you determine your tests, you're going to find out how to better place those athletes into those specific categories. So we like to do 30-meter block start or a 4-point from 30 meters. We like to do 30 flies. We also do a 30 to 50-second timed run. We'll do timed 150s or timed 300s. For the 400, 800 meter type of athlete, we'll do 2-minute to 3-minute timed runs, and we'll always include standing long jumps and standing triples. And these types of exercises are going to give us some intel where we can take that and use that as far as where to place those athletes in these categories. And as a coach, that's going to help you be able to service them a little bit better. The last thing I'd say is definitely ask your athletes questions. For instance, Gage and Crystal, they love sled work. They love the run rocket. They love banded accelerations. They love to feel like, I guess, they're pulling. And for instance, that's something that if I hadn't have asked them, I would have taken it out of their program earlier. It's something that I leave in a little bit later in their program as a result. And I found that out just by talking to your athletes and asking them. And that's something that's just, it's simple, but it's something that you can pay attention to and do. Thank you guys. There's my contact information. You guys can fire me an email if you have any questions or anything that's specific at all. You know, I had fun today. Hope I was able to help somebody out there. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we do have some questions. I guess since it's right off the top, you just talked about it. So you've talked about developing your athletes and developing your athlete profiles. So Kurt, you coach, you just said 7 to 27. Nick, you're primarily university level, right? Looking in and around just after club. We've got pro. So I guess when do you start developing that profile? I guess at what age? And is it you? I guess you have some formula-based stuff. So is it strictly observational, or are you using a lot of gadgets and such to find these benchmarks?
Is it specifically a question?
Sure. Nope. Let's.
Sure.
Kurt,
okay. Yeah.
Kurt, you start. Yeah.
So for my grouping, what we have to do is we do some testing. We try to create it as games as we start. We'll do, it's like a little pentathlon kind of thing that we do in the end of the fall season. We do it again at the end of the summer season, where we spend a lot of time in the pit doing standing long, standing triple. We make a big deal out of it. You know, we'll do 30-meter flies. We'll time them, 60-meter, 30-meter flies and 30-meter accelerations. We'll time them. We'll write them down. We get the coaches there. We make it a whole session where, you know, they clap for the younger kids. And in that, it gives us a little bit of intel, gives us a little bit of information. With the young and the developing athletes, it's more fun, you know, fun-based. But it also gives us an idea of where the athlete may end up moving along or going. You know, maybe we start to decide that they spend a little bit more time over at the jumps, although they're still doing some of the other things. But it's just a way for us to keep track of some of the things that the athletes are doing. From an older perspective, yes, we do testing. We make it more of a group type of a deal. When I was coaching at the University of Windsor, we would have the 6 girls that I worked with most recently. We'd get them into the pit. We do standing longs. It'd be a competition for dinner. You know, for who's going to buy, you know, Buffalo Wild Wings or something. We'd make it a competition and fun that way. There's a lot of good coaches out there that have tons of information specifically on benchmarks. There's Keba at Harvard that has a ton. Coach Boo has a ton. You know, there's tons out there. You know, if someone wants something specific, they could send me an email, and I'm sure I could find some of it for them.
Cool. Thank you. Nick, Charles, do you want to add? Do you want to talk a little bit?
I have 2 things. Well, firstly, listening to Kurt talk, he talks about the diversity of his program. And even though he's categorizing athlete in one of those areas, he's touching on all of those things. And there's something Charles said to us the other day. You don't have to be perfect at them. You just have to be in touch with all of them. So I think that knowing where an athlete is going to be successful is not necessarily where you put them. If you look at Kurt's example of Brandon, he ran the 2 and the 4 and probably did some jumping at a younger age and moved to that event. So there are profiles and there are realities about the sport. So I think as long as we're developing all of those qualities and then getting more specific later, then that's a good thing.
I'll add to that as well. I think as coaches, you have to have a good eye, and you're able to spot talent in some of these athletes. So relying on that, it's key. First thing I like to do when I see, when I come across an athlete, is just have them run 100 meters. Let me see, naturally kind of where you're at, and then start to, figure out how what needs adjusting and working on. And again, being at the hub, we have the IST team there, getting them to assess the athletes and finding out where they have weaknesses and and some of those things starting to work and tighten up some of those things. But I always go with my eyes. I'm very technical, so I'd like to see that person run, no matter what age you are. Just get out there and do a run for me, and I get quite a bit of information from that.
I like it. Okay, so let's feed into that a little bit. Okay, so Charles, we got asked a few times specifically with drills. Every day, or is your workout set up specifically for, this is always in the warm up, or we develop this is a specific day. So how do you program that specific part? And then I guess feeding into that, I'll ask the whole group of what are your go-to drills, and does it change based on athlete, or do you have specific ones that we're working with all the time?
So it's not every day. It's probably 2 or 3 times a week. And in the beginning, or if I start working with an athlete off the bat, it's just a matter of seeing them execute all the drills, and seeing them do those drills helps me to understand again where some of their strengths and weaknesses are, and whether they're aware of their limbs and how they're moving and so forth. Eventually, we'll move into doing drills according to the workout. And we may change the tempo on them and emphasize certain things that they're lacking. So it's just having the drills be involved part of their routine as you go through, and apply it to the individual athletes accordingly. But it's always in there, about 2 to 3 times a week, depending on where you are in your program. And then eventually, even as we lead into a major or something like that, it's being sharp and quick with those drills, getting off the ground and so forth.
I like those. Do you have specific ones that you'll always use?
I love the B run.
The B run. Okay.
It always shows the weaknesses or the B runs, and just being able to snap that. And I don't let them do that right off the bat, right? But when I get to the B runs, then I'm very serious, and it exposes them.
Yeah,
so,
definitely. I find it's one of the hardest ones to really perfect, and that's it, because you either look like a fool or you start to get it.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, do you have any specific ones that you'll always use?
I don't know if there's anything specific. What I would say is that drills are always great in providing context, and the closer you can be to the actual activity, the better off you are. So Charles made the point of he really likes the A run, he really likes the B run. Well, it's probably the closest in the spectrum of things that he does that is close to sprinting. So for me, I talked about reduced hurdle, space, and height. The more we can affect rhythm in that event, I personally like. Doesn't mean I don't do walkovers and things of that nature. It's just different in terms of what I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, reduce height and reduce spacing. I love probably 3-step work at around 750, 760, but that context is really going to be, that specific drill and drill distance is going to be driven by the individual athlete.
Perfect. Awesome. I don't know. Let's go to our next question. So we've got U16, U18, U20. Let's think university, and then post collegiate. Advice for working with younger groups, middle group, kind of then to the pro. What do you see of the comparison? Do you have specific advice for working with those ones, and obviously not jumping the gun too much, or I don't want to speak too much, but like that idea. Do you have any advice for people with this? Nick, do you want to go first with thinking, like, I guess you're getting your first year, that idea that you've been on Legion teams, that Legion to your Canada Summer Games one, to now you are our senior and captain. What that kind of idea, like there's a lot of different levels there, and obviously it's not the same. And you've talked about hurdling and the days per week, but do you have more insight that you'd like to share?
Just sorry, can you repeat the question? I do have something there.
Can I give you a lot? Absolutely. Yeah. So just thinking different age groups. do we have any advice for working with younger groups versus the older groups?
I think that in dealing with younger people, you're checking the boxes a little bit, and I don't mean that in a box checker way. I mean that in a we need to touch on everything that's going to be required later. Kurt talked about conversations. I think an ongoing conversation is important, but I do think that the conversations you have with elite athletes or senior athletes who are hoping to be elite, get more specific to them. So I would say when you're dealing with kids at a younger age, make sure you're touching on the elements that are important to your event, so that the key indicators, the key performance indicators are going to drive that. Try to be diverse, and then get more specific as you're older. So because, like Charles said, he gets to the B exercise and we start to see weaknesses. The more specific you get, the more individual those needs are going to be.
I like that. Let's see, Kurt, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think Nick said a lot of good things there. I think that for me, when I'm looking at the developmental athletes, I think it's most important that you try to make them understand speed and power trumps the majority of things. So if you can instill those types of qualities early, you know, like for instance, we all mentioned multi-jumps. All the kids in our club will be at the pit doing some form of multi-jump at some point in time. Why? Because they have to be able to express power. Why? Because they need to be coordinated. You know, the distance runners, yes. The middle distance runners, yeah, they got to be at the pit and do that a little bit as well. You know, it's something that's important developmentally. So I think what you have to do with kids are, as Nick mentioned, allow them to express speed and power qualities. You can always add volume and distance afterwards, but you know, put them in situations where they can do those things more often. Learn how to accelerate properly. You know, learn proper postures. Learn how to be up tall. You know, learn where to contact the ground underneath, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, obviously come up with your list of KPIs that you think are important or are important to your specific events, but with a focus on speed, power first, and then add the other things afterwards, because you can always add volume later on.
Like that. Charles,
speak?
if you want, yeah. Do you want to add?
I'll just say real quickly. The athletes have to become student of the sport, right? When they get to the high performance level, you know, performing is number one. Being able to perform on demand, and if they take accountability and they start to understand what it is that they're doing out there, then they will do a better job of you know, getting better and executing and getting to that level to where they can compete internationally. For me, they have to have a book, and they have to start, you know, recording what's necessary when they're learning stuff from the coach or other athletes or ISC member. They have to become student of the game. Otherwise, they're not going to succeed.
Take some ownership. I like that. Cool. That's good. Just gonna go through making sure I cover.
Keep them coming, Kyle. Come on.
You got, okay, good. We got a few more minutes. Okay, so one of our questions that we've got is what percentage of training every week is technical, speed endurance, and capacity for the different stages of development in a 400, 800 meter runner? So, Kurt, let's start with you. I think that would be, I think this is more directed towards you. Yeah. So
Okay,
looking at how you set it up, what percentage of your training is technical, speed endurance, and then your capacity for the different stages of development for a 400, 800 meter runner?
So I'd always
big
start.
Question. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I look at from developmental, I would say the capacity types of work or that type of category would be minimal compared to the amount of time we spend with the other aspects. So if we're looking at percentage wise, I'm probably going to say it would be 70 other, 30 aerobic or capacity based at that point when they're younger. As they start to develop and get a little bit older, I would say that that needle is going to start to move. Obviously, a youth age athlete is going to be able to handle volumes, that are a little bit more than the average athlete. And when you get to professionals, obviously a little bit more. Like Brandon is somewhere between 50 and 60, 65 miles a week, on average. For a high school kid, like, we have a young girl right now, she's run 227, I think. For her, I'm not going to say I'm managing her mileage perfectly, but, she might be 10 or 12 miles a week max. You know what I mean? Right now, she still dabbles in the 400 hurdles a little bit, 300 and 400 hurdles and that sort of stuff. So I'd say as the athlete gets older, that needle is going to shift as far as volume is going to, as far as volume is concerned. The speed, the special endurance stuff, race pace stuff at race pace, I think we'd probably spend a little bit more time in that range for the athletes. And it's not a ton, but I'd probably say we spend one session a week. And keep in mind, with the developmental age athletes we have them for probably 3 to 4 days a week, on average, during the indoor and during the fall season. If it's 4 weeks, if it's 4 times a week, that's fantastic, but we may only get them for 3. So I would rather us spend the time with acceleration, being up tall, learning how to be fast, and manage their body at those speeds. And then, later on in the season, we can start to add a little bit more of the volume.
Okay.
Hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Yes. So I guess curious, how important is your indoor season racing? Thinking, let's look at Charles. Like, how important is indoors versus outdoors? And obviously, it'll change from, I guess, an Olympic year. But like focusing on true sprinter, and then let's talk kind of hurdles, because it would, if you're not a 60 hurdler, it's very different, that focus. And 800, I just curious from the different stages, how important for you is the indoor season? Like, what kind of emphasis does that play in your cycles?
It's very important, but it's not so much important internationally, if you will, unless there's a World Indoor Championship, right? So we're at this stage, we're after winning medals and achieving personal best and being ranked in the world. So if it's not going to contribute to any of that, then it's not so important. For me personally, in my program, I like the athletes, I like to break things up. So if they're training 4 or 5 months and they haven't had an opportunity to get out there, compete, and mix it up a little bit, I need them to do that. So we may use the indoor season for a bit of competition sessions just to see where they're at, have them, get a feel for things before getting back and preparing for the outdoor season. So for me, it's very important whether we have a major competition happening or not. But I try not to have them stress too much about it.
Mm-hmm. Nick, obviously university, very important. but thinking, like, I guess where do you, like, you're obviously going to have to double peak, but how does that look? Like, thinking if, you go.
I think it's event obviously specific. Obviously, in the short hurdles, we're trying to develop rhythm. The more we can race, the better. So for a 100-meter hurdler outdoors, I think the indoor season is an opportunity to get races. And at least for us at a high school level, there aren't many of them. And if there are many of them, we're changing distances, we're changing heights as we move from the school system to the club system. So I think the indoor season for a 100-meter hurdler can be very important. I think for a long hurdler, it gives you the opportunity to develop some other capacities. Maybe you're not dealing with hurdling as often, but you're probably still staying in touch with it. The reality is that you can deal with that 300 or 600 meter range in our context, in the Canadian context. You can deal with that 248 range if you're in the American context. So you're essentially touching on other elements that are important to you. And like Charles said, he's chasing medals and performance at the elite level. So he's using indoors to work on some things that contribute to that. For me, as a developmental coach or a university coach, which I still consider to be development, you need those elements. So it's more important to us because we have to race. We can't, like Charles said, you can't race. You can't train for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months and expect someone always to be in your sport. So I think the indoor season is certainly important to me as a Canadian university coach, but I also think it's important from a development perspective because it's an opportunity to practice your event at the intensities that are required.
Yeah. For me, I think indoors is important, but it's dependent upon the athlete in the group. So for instance, an athlete like Brandon doesn't race indoors much, is not fond of it, doesn't like the small track at all. And the truth of the matter for an athlete like him, he does a ton of stuff that's, like I said, at race pace or faster. So he's never too far away at that phase, at that SPP phase. He's never too far away from being able to step on the track, which is why, like the last few years, he was able to come out and run, open up at 145 to 145.0. He can do that because of how intense he practices. But for a developing athlete, I think I err towards the side of Nick in that you need to race, especially in the country that we live in, where the weather is not always incredible, and especially the springs are not obviously that favorable for us either. So it could, if you choose not to race indoors, or do something substantial at that intensity indoors, essentially you're 8 or 9, you're double the time that Charles mentioned, as far as being in contact with those types of intensities. And when you're younger, it's a little harder to simulate those kinds of intensities because you're not governing your body the same way as an elite or an older athlete is. So I think for the younger athletes, yeah, it's not a bad idea to race unless they're playing, they're getting that intensity from playing another sport, which is okay as well, right? If they're doing something else, by all means, go and do it. But if they aren't, then they would need to get the intensity from track and from racing indoors.
Awesome. Well, I want to be cautious of your guys' time. We have hit our hour. We actually just went over by a couple minutes. So I want to thank you for being a part of this, for sharing your knowledge. I really appreciate that, giving your contact information. That's amazing. So thank you very much. Yeah, this was amazing. I felt pretty excited to be here right now and to listen to these stories. And I love that you guys all had your own stuff, but it was quite similar, and it wasn't like a magic formula. You guys were just, I liked it. It's really cool to see that like at the level you guys are, that it's not that it's simple, but you're providing the tools, and you're willing to share this stuff, and that's fantastic. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.